Okay, I'm only going to make one video to look at these 3 movies. Why? I mean, it's pretty obvious. There's been so many videos made on the subject that I feel would be empty to try to make something really long form about it. Just look at Just Right's 5-part series that I don't think I really disagree if anything said there, or Lindsay Ellis's highly acclaimed series that goes beyond film critique and turns into a documentary analyzing behind the scenes disasters. I agree with most said there, so yeah. I still thought I would make this video to offer up a couple of my personal insights, but seeing the Hobbit films are now just short of probably a Plinkett review, don't expect this to be that big of a video on this subject. I'm saving that amount of effort for my Lord of the Rings videos. The Hobbit movies were such a massive disappointment for me. I was just hitting my appreciation for the Lord of the Rings films and of course had always loved the book. My dad had read it to me as a kid. It's my favorite simple adventure story, something that never needed to be an epic like Lord of the Rings. And then this bloated mess comes out, where things that distinctly helped in terms of Lord of the Rings adaptation to screen make this so much worse by doing it the same here. The editing back and forth between characters is key in this regard. In Two Towers, the characters in the novel are out of order and focus individually 10 to 12 chapters at a time. So therefore, in the movie, they made it go in chronological order, and it works. With The Hobbit, however, it's all singularly focused on one story. There's no need to split up the narrative and ultimately lose all potential atmosphere and ability to be immersed into a scene. But they did it for no reason. Like Bilbo and the riddles for the ring scene being intercut with the escape from the goblins. In the novel, that had already happened, so we could just focus on this creepy scene that ultimately had enormous importance to the future of Middle-earth. And in my opinion, it makes the scene with Gollum feel insignificant compared to the bombastic action happening at the same time. The animated film did this so much better. And yes, that's including Andy Serkis's motion capture work. They have all these elements in play for incredible potential, but they do things to completely mess it up. The Bilbo and Smaug scene by itself is incredible. It's tense, the special effects feel enormous and real, and Benedict Cumberbatch is amazing. But they refuse to let you immerse yourself in this huge scene because they cut back to all these dwarves that stayed behind in Lake Town for a romance subplot. The pacing in this entire thing is awful. Moments that felt important in the text are turned into meaningless moments so we can segue into the Gandalf and the Necromancer subplot. For example, I remember the spiders in the novel as this big, important battles, and the dwarves had no weapons. So they fought this giant army of spiders using rocks, sticks, and whatever they could while Bilbo did his thinking to help out. It felt real and gritty and was honestly my favorite part of the novel. But due to the structure, it's a little blip that gets interrupted by Legolas and his army of perfect elves. Which is also just kind of boring. When Legolas and Tauriel arrive, they're just doing more to make this massive doors fade into one. Sure, maybe we needed one female character in this modern Hollywood blockbuster to appeal to the female audience. But honestly, I say if you wanted one in there, just make some of the dwarves female. Honestly, we know dwarf women exist. Gimli explained it in the extended edition of Two Towers. We see some in the intro to this film. Therefore, just make one or two of the dwarves that had no distinguishing characteristics in the novel into females. Or does it not count if they have to have beards? They have to be sexy, right? Oh. I'm just saying, if you want more diversity, have it make sense and not take away from the story you're adapting. I mean, it's not exactly progressive that the female character they shoved here anyway is defined almost entirely by her love interest. Hell, it just makes these more like the Star Wars prequels. Terrible CGI, senseless battles that go on for way too long, and a love story with completely nauseating dialogue. The biggest difference between these and the Star Wars prequels, on a story basis at least, these have no right to be this bad. George was going off his mind and creativity for the prequels. Jackson was going off one of the most beloved children's books of all time. I'm not even saying you have to be slavishly faithful. The Lord of the Rings took heavy creative liberties, and it turned out for the best. But there's always a place where you go way too far, and by the time you're almost completely ignoring the main character, I say that's the definitive place where it's going way too far. Martin Freeman is the perfect Bilbo. Whenever he has a spotlight on him to bring this character life with all his quirky mannerisms and humorous moments, it's absolutely perfect. but the films just forget about him for big pieces of the runtime to the point where he almost feels like a supporting character in a big ensemble. That's okay in something like Lord of the Rings, which is multiple characters important in their own way to justify focus. But with this, it's literally called The Hobbit. By doing this, they ignore the central theme of the novel, so when this moment occurs,
If more people valued home above gold, this world would be a merry place.
it feels completely meaningless and nothing. It wasn't earned in the slightest. The one thing about this film trilogy that I can praise without question is the score by Howard Shore. He does the right thing that so many franchises do wrong by. He brings back the big themes from the previous movies in moments where it's needed. Even in scores I like, as in Harry Potter, they usually just incorporate a single theme throughout the entire movie, even when the same composer is in tow. But with Howard Shore's Hobbit scores, he brings back everything we love, but not in a lazy way, because there's so many incredible new themes in play. The Dwarves' main theme, the Misty Mountain theme, and especially Smaug's theme feel incredible. Even for a shallow and worthless love subplot, you can rely on Shore to create a pleasant theme for it, to at least attempt into manipulating us to care. It's not necessarily as grand as his score for Lord of the Rings, but unlike everything else in this trilogy, he must have realized it doesn't need to be. The Hobbit is definitively a children's book with a light, quirky tone, but this is trying so hard to fit source material to the Lord of the Rings tone, and in the same way that Rankin Bass trying to turn Return of the King into a lighthearted children's film, it doesn't work. And I'm not saying this had to be G-rated or anything, but this just feels off at times, especially when it's mixed in the scenes that are setting up Lord of the Rings. Which is so weird, by the way. We've seen movies like Amazing Spider-Man 2 or Age of Ultron that get torn up over teasing films yet to come. But with all this set up, it's presented in a way like we're supposed to be excited for it to come out soon. But Lord of the Rings was released 10 years before these even started. Everyone who is going to buy them already has the VHS, DVD, Extended Edition DVD, and the Extended Edition Blu-ray. Why bother? It makes absolutely no sense. In case you're wondering at this point, after the overview of the entire trilogy, what my thoughts on each as individual films are, well, here's very brief thoughts on each one. The Hobbit, an unexpected disappointment. Honestly, I think this is the best one. The stuff in the Hobbit hole is pleasant and all the setup is nice. The second act is incredibly tedious because all the stuff placed in that adds nothing to Bilbo's story. But the last hour is actually pretty good because all of the padding was shoved in before it, so it just focuses on the actual narrative, even if I have major flaws with the editing between scenes. And plus, the way it ends actually puts me in a decent mood. 5 out of 10. The Hobbit, the Desecration of Slag. Everyone says this is the best in the trilogy. I think it's the worst. The first act in Mirkwood is unbelievably rushed through. This is the one place where I think dragging it out for a slow burn would have actually made sense, and then you exploded into a great final battle with the spiders. But no, all of that is through in the first 30 minutes. Then the Lake Town stuff is unbelievably awful and a complete drag. Making Bard an actual character was good, but it's the only redeeming thing here. The final act where we finally meet Smaug starts off incredible, but the finale is nothing but terrible, with physics-defying doors trying to drown a fireproof dragon in molten cheese. It puts me in a terrible mood every time. 4 out of 10. The Hobbit, the Bulging of the Five Armies. Again, the first act is actually pretty great. It's focused on Bilbo and the Arkenstone, his relationship with Thorin, and his little trick to stop the battle. But then the battle starts. And it's pretty bad. Jackson's sweeping and emotionally powerful epic battles are completely absent, replaced with shallow CGI bore fests that exhaust me in a bad way. Plus, Alfred is a terrible character in too many ways to count, and is basically the Jar Jar of Middle-earth. The only thing I get out of it is how incredibly goofy sometimes it is. 4 out of 10. So, that's my overall thoughts on the Hobbit trilogy. You may be wondering, with all these flaws, I have said there are things in here that are great. Do I ever just rewatch them for the sake of these well-done scenes? Nope. The shit in these movies is hard to stomach. However, as in many things in the age of the internet, fans can indeed make something salvageable. So therefore, the absolute best way to experience Peter Jackson's Hobbit trilogy is one of the edits that have been made. You can shop around and find the one that works best for you, but my personal favorite, probably linked below, is the version known as the Bilbo Edition. It cuts it all down to the length of a Lord of the Rings extended edition, all for the sake of bringing us back to Bilbo's central story, and honestly, it really works. The themes of the novel actually feel effective in this context, and even though I love the animated film, this lets me enjoy the Hobbit story at a slower pace. It incorporates footage from the extended edition that was actually important to the overall story. And I was admittedly worried in some of the scenes where the actual movie messed things up so bad, as in Smaug's gold-covered exit from the Lonely Mountain, but the editing from it into the beginning of the third movie in this fan version is honestly impressive, and I may have not noticed if I hadn't seen the movies already. It of course still isn't as good as The Lord of the Rings, because that would be hard to do thanks to pieces here and there that are near impossible to redeem. But in this capacity, I'm honestly willing to give it an 8.5 out of 10. I feel like it's the best we're going to get. Thank you so much for watching. I'm currently in the scripting process for my Lord of the Rings trilogy reviews, so expect them to release soon. They're going to be big. Comment your thoughts down below, and please subscribe to my channel if you feel sufficiently inclined.